Hello everyone, and welcome to this session on multicultural competence. I'm Angelique Watson, and it is my pleasure to bring this information to you today. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines culture as the customary beliefs, social forms, and material traits of a racial, religious, or social group. Furthermore, it is defined as the integrated pattern of human knowledge, belief, and behavior that depends upon the capacity for learning and transmitting knowledge to succeeding generations. Therefore, in a world with 7 continents, 235 countries, and 72 counties and territories, there are boundless cultures and subcultures with different languages, values, attitudes, beliefs, and views. Interestingly, these cultures and subcultures are expected to coexist on one planet, sharing the world's finite natural resources and living in harmony with themselves and one another. Even Revelations 7 verse 9 reiterates the sheer number and variety of cultures by stating, "I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb." This presentation will explore how vital it is for those in people helping professions to be culturally aware and multiculturally competent in order to assist people of the many different cultures to live in harmony with themselves and others. In particular, this presentation will consider the Aboriginal culture, the barriers that exist when assisting the people within this culture, and how these barriers could be overcome in order to provide effective counselling and care for the Aboriginal people. Firstly, this presentation will explore the idea of multicultural competence in counselling, the ways in which counsellors can become more effective in working with clients of many diverse cultures. During the past 3 decades, the development of multicultural competence in the field of counselling has been discussed at length, and the overwhelming view within the people helping sector is that multicultural counselling competence is no longer optional, but essential for effective counselling practice. It has been suggested that prior to understanding their own level of multicultural competence, counsellors should identify the attitudes, beliefs, knowledge, and skills required to work with people from different cultures to their own. Therefore, leaders in the field of counselling have proposed a framework for multicultural competence. This presentation will attempt to summarize that framework. The proposed framework is broken down into 3 domains of competency as identified by Collins and Arthur in 2005. These further contain many additional core competencies. On the next slide, we can see the culture-infused counselling model with the 3 domains of competency as discussed. I would encourage you to pause at this point and just familiarize yourself with some of the elements on this page, but I will, as I said, attempt to summarize this further as we go. In summary, counsellors should possess a cultural awareness of self and others. In other words, understand the client's worldview. And more than that, seek to promote a culturally sensitive working alliance. Extensive suggestions have been made as to how counsellors could become more culturally aware of self and others, including conducting interviews. So interviews with potential clients and people of their cultures, but also interviews of people within your own family who know a bit more about your own culture. Completing certified courses, reading literature, creating timelines, using role plays, attending religious ceremonies of some of the cultures, and reviewing case studies. It is important to note at this point that this list is not exhaustive, but a detailed description of each competency area is provided by Collins and Arthur for your perusal if you so wish. However, once cultural awareness is established through these methods, the goal of the counsellor is to promote a culturally sensitive working alliance. This competency could be viewed as the practical application of the gathered information, and some suggestions on how to achieve this include the establishment of trusting and respectful relationships with clients that consider their cultural identities, and collaborating with clients to establish counseling goals that respond to dimensions of their cultural identity. This could be achieved through strategies such as learning another language prominent in client populations, videotaping sessions, and seeking feedback on verbal and non-verbal communication from a person within the culture, working closely with a mentor, and participating in cultural specific healing process. Again, this list is not exhaustive. Now we move on to an overview of the Aboriginal culture. So thus far, this presentation has considered the importance of multicultural competence in counselling, but it is further important to explore a relevant example of a culture and understand how this competence can be utilised in practical terms. Whilst it has been identified that there are many cultures in the world, here in Australia, the Aboriginal culture is one of great significance, and its complexity provides an interesting application of multicultural competence. Firstly, it is important to note that the Australian Aboriginal culture is built around a collectivist kinship. This means that the Aboriginal people define themselves in terms of their bond or association with other people and their community. The Aboriginal culture is distinguished by family connection, community connection, and a connection to the country or land in which they live. In Australia, the idea of being on country is central to the Aboriginal worldview, and Aboriginal people are defined by the land in which they live. Aboriginal people understand how to be active contributors to family and community life and attempt to raise their children to do the same. The intergenerational trauma, cultural disconnection, and family disruption of the past, and the effects of each of these factors among many Aboriginal communities are increasingly being recognised by the broader Australian community. As a result, the wider Australian community is now also acknowledging the disadvantage of many Aboriginal families and communities. This highlights once again the need to reach out to the people within this culture and provide effective counselling and care to support them. However, in order to do this effectively, the awareness and understanding of this culture is vital for the identification of potential barriers to counselling and how to overcome them. In particular, the factors that will be explored are how the people in this culture value time, information, trust, and social relations. In 2015, Queensland Health created a document titled Cultural Capability, which provides some strategies on how to effectively communicate with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. In this document, the government highlighted how the people of these cultures value time, information, trust, and social relations. Firstly, time is considered differently by the Aboriginal people when compared to the Western culture. People within the Aboriginal culture focus on family and community rather than following strict schedules and deadlines, as we tend to do. Secondly, people from the Aboriginal culture place high value on the privacy and confidentiality of information. They are reluctant to share personal stories with strangers, and information is initially withheld, as shame may result from the sharing of personal information or confidentiality breaches. Therefore, building trust through the fostering and maintenance of relationships over time is vital in the counselling space. This also links to the value placed on social relations, which this paper has established is high within the Aboriginal culture. Earlier we mentioned that they are defined by their family connection, community connection, and connection to country. Now that we have a bit of a better understanding of the broader Aboriginal culture, let's have a look at overcoming some counselling barriers. As mentioned previously in this presentation, the cultural beliefs and worldviews of different people influence how they think, perceive the world, and respond in counselling situations. To overcome potential counselling barriers, it is vital for counsellors to engage in reflective practice without judgment. Very importantly, without judgment, before, during, and after interacting with people whose beliefs and worldviews are different to their own. For the purpose of this presentation, this document has been subdivided into the areas deemed different to that of the Western culture. So on the next few slides, we're just going to go through some of what the Queensland Health paper titled Cultural Capability speaks about and advises when dealing with Aboriginal people. Some ideas on how these potential barriers could be overcome have been included. Firstly, we have a look at rapport. So the Aboriginal people place great significance on building relationships and the long-term maintenance of these relationships. It is important for counsellors to build rapport with this group of people by seeing the whole person and not just their issues of concern. Some practical ways to do this is to greet them in a friendly manner, especially the first time you meet them, and share stories about one another to gain and maintain trust. Next, English is the second language of many people within this culture. Furthermore, some people within this culture speak English in different dialects. Overcoming potential language barriers could be done by learning their language, avoiding complex words and jargon, checking for understanding, and seeking help from translators. As mentioned previously, time is considered differently by the Aboriginal people when compared to the Western culture. More emphasis is placed on family and community rather than following strict schedules and deadlines. To practically allow for this, counsellors could allocate flexible consultation times, but more importantly, slow sessions down and not rush clients within this culture. Counsellors should also be aware that some non-verbal communication could have different meanings in the Aboriginal culture. Be conscious of how close they are standing to a person and always seek permission to touch them. On the next slide, we have a look at silence. So in the Aboriginal culture, silent pauses are common and are used to listen and show respect. I know very often some people don't like, that silence and try to fill the space by continuing to talk. But in actual fact, in the Aboriginal community, they like that silence to listen and show respect. A positive use of silence is encouraged and should not be misunderstood. Counsellors should observe the silence and body language of Aboriginal clients to determine when it is appropriate to recommence the conversation. Counsellors should also allow clients adequate time to respond to questions and seek clarification that what was discussed has been understood. Next, this is a more commonly known attribute of the Aboriginal culture is that they avoid eye contact. So whilst avoiding eye contact is considered rude and dishonest in the Western culture, it is customarily a sign of respect within the Aboriginal culture. So to convey respect, counsellors should follow the client's lead and modify their own eye contact accordingly. It is also advisable to avoid eye contact with a client of the opposite gender unless they initiate it and are comfortable. In order to avoid the Aboriginal client feeling ashamed about some of the personal information shared in sessions, counsellors should be discreet and avoid conversations in public areas. Building rapport with clients would help to cultivate trust, allowing them to feel comfortable sharing with the counsellor and in their surroundings. Counsellors should always ensure confidentiality. Questioning. Indirect questions is the preferred way, is most preferred by people in the Aboriginal cultures, as direct questions often lead to misunderstandings. It is essential for counsellors to clarify that clients in this culture have understood the questions and should avoid compound questions as far as possible. Furthermore, it has been recognised that Aboriginal people tend to agree with questions, even when they do not understand or agree. Counsellors should explain questions thoroughly and ask respectfully what they have understood from the questions if the client repeatedly agrees. I have added my own personal tip for effective counselling as it came to me while I was putting these slides together. But I feel like it would be really significant and really important to get out into nature. because Aboriginal people are defined by the land in which they live and would feel completely comfortable and at ease sharing their ideas in their own space, I think it's quite an interesting and different approach that could be quite effective in the space. And in conclusion, overall, counsellors should not only be culturally aware, but should work on key skills to increase their multicultural competence. In addition to this, building rapport seems to be the most effective starting point to overcoming counselling barriers. Thank you so much for listening. Please have a look at some of the documents I've spoken about, some of the references I've shared in these slides to further increase your knowledge about multicultural competence and the Aboriginal culture specifically. Thank you for your time.